Hi, this is John Pettigrew, and you're listening to Talking Through My Hat, a podcast that explores bookish businesses, the fantastic people who create them, and what those people have learned. I'm a hat wearer, a recovering editor, and the creator of Future Proofs, enabling editors and authors to work better online. To find out more, visit wearefutureproofs.com or follow me on Twitter at John_Pettigrew. Hi and welcome back to Talking Through My Hat. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about privilege, about some of the factors that can affect accessibility and availability of jobs, careers and many other things, based not on someone's ability to do a job, but on where they come from, the background they've had. I'm going to do that by looking a little bit at myself, particularly because, of course, the conversation with Suzanne Collier last week, but also some Twitter hashtags that I saw recently, my career path and work in publishing, and also because the Panic Report that was published fairly recently looking at representation in the media and in publishing in particular, and looking at this idea as well of the meritocracy. People at the top like to think they got there because they deserve to be there, because they're better than the people who didn't get there. And this is something we don't just see in publishing. The software industry is grappling with this itself at the moment. It's something that is kind of a human nature thing. People like to believe they deserve what they've had rather than that they received it because of a privilege that other people lack. And so what I'm going to talk about a little bit today is my own past experience, how I've got to where I am today, and in the hope of exposing some of my privilege, some of the ways I've benefited from the way I was brought up, the places I was, the networks I ended up being plugged into, because I am a white, middle-class, cis-het male in Britain in the 20th century when I was growing up. So to give you a bit of background on me, I'm from the north. I was born and brought up on the Wirral near Liverpool, as you can obviously tell from my accent. But I can do a Scouse accent, though, but, you know, it's not really me anymore, because I've been living in the south for a worryingly long time. My parents actually met at university in Scotland. So, yep, both my parents went to university. They moved down to England after they got married for work. So I was born and brought up in the north of England. I did go to a private school. My parents both were at jobs to let that happen. But that did open up one very important thing to me, not just university, but the possibility of going to Oxbridge. Might well not have been something that would have even occurred had I not been at the school I was at. The school's career service more or less gave up on me once they realised that I was a biologist who wasn't interested in being a doctor, but I was still plugged into this network at the school, this expectation they had that people would go to Oxbridge. They had prospectuses, they organised trips to open days and this kind of stuff. It was just, and I had people around me who were doing the same thing, so we could bounce ideas. So that it was a natural thing. And I did end up going to Cambridge for my degree, which is why I've ended up living in the south of England for 29 years now. So, yeah, I went to university. When I was at university, I did a degree in science. I did a PhD in science. I discovered I didn't like lab work and wasn't all that good at it. But I did like reading about it. So the possibility of working in publishing seemed like a good one. And as a bit of a nerdy, control-freaky sort of a person, editorial work definitely appealed. So I thought, hey, maybe this is going to be something I could do. I could go and work on academic journals, science journals, and do that. But after my degree, I was unemployed for 6 months, 7 months, because it turns out it's really hard to get a job in publishing. In that time, I actually moved back up to Manchester for my wife's first teaching job, which was a temporary contract up there. And I spent that time applying for jobs. After 3 months, I got onto a job club, which was organised by the local job centre. It was a condition of my receiving benefits was that I went to the job club, but it was a really useful exercise. I learned a lot there about the process of applying for jobs, applying for work. It was, again, I had a university degree, and it was a graduate job club. So it was surrounded by people in a similar situation to me, mostly fairly new graduates. A good group of people of the age I am now, in their mid-40s, who've been through a kind of management track, kind of people who find themselves looking for work. But it meant that we were able to support each other in looking for graduate-ish work. The biggest lesson I learned was you have to apply for a lot of jobs. If you want to get into publishing, it takes time. At least it did for me. It does for a lot of people. You're not going to get the first job. There's a lot of competition for publishing jobs, even where you can distinguish yourself from the pack. So it really matters, I discovered later on when I was myself recruiting, because there are so many applicants, you're always looking for people, but naturally, who stand out. The people who are the same just blur together. So it's trying to find ways of leveraging your actual experience for the particular jobs you're applying to. But it is a numbers game. When I was on the job club, one of the best pieces of advice they gave us was that if you're applying for jobs and you have a perfect CV, if you apply for 10 jobs, you might get 4 or 5 offers of an interview. If you have perfect interview technique and you go to 10 interviews, you might get 4 or 5 job offers. Because you cannot, as an applicant, control what they're looking for. You don't know exactly what they're looking for. And you can't control or know who else is applying for those positions. So you can't judge yourself too harshly when you get rejected or don't just hear nothing back from job applications. And that level of persistence can be, well, it's a thing that, going to a job club forces you to do if you want to get your benefits. But having the ability to be unemployed for that length of time while following that was something that was fortunate. My wife had a job, so we had a little bit of slack in that. And we were living in Manchester. We weren't living in Cambridge where we are now, so it's that little bit cheaper to live. That first publishing job was an assistant editor job on a science journal back down in Cambridge. So I got sucked back down to the south of England where everything is expensive. Fortunately, the job did pay enough to cover, with my wife's temp teaching, to cover our Cambridge rent. And that job, I was there for about nearly 3 years, because 2.5 years in, they decided to move the office from Cambridge to London. And I thought, no, I don't like being in London. Certainly don't want to commute to London. So I took their redundancy offer. Fortunately, we had about 6 months' notice on that. And the company was very good about supporting those of us who were leaving as well as those who were staying. They supported us with training, even if it wasn't job-related. They gave us lots of notice. You could have time off to do interviews and training courses, and, they were very good about it. I actually went freelance after that. I was freelance for about 6-7 years, which I really enjoyed. It was taking that experience I already had from working in a really well-run academic journal publisher. I was able to take that and work for years as a freelancer, working mostly for journals, but I was able, the nice thing with being a freelancer is you can do other things. So I did some training, mostly how to use Microsoft Word. This was back in the early noughties. Ran courses on how to make them, for editors, of how to make the most on Microsoft Word. I did some writing for people like the NHS and stuff for documentation they were doing. But eventually, the freelance life got to me. Being by myself too much wasn't good. So I was back in the position of applying for office jobs again. Fortunately, I now had 8, 9, nearly 10 years of editorial experience behind me. So it wasn't that long before I got a job at local education publisher, where I was there for 8 years. I started off as an editor on science books. In the 8 years I was there, I had 5 different jobs, because what was really interesting to me working there was that although they were very traditional in a lot of what they did, they were kind of trying to do some new stuff. So I found myself promoted to be a senior editor rather than being a team leader, as most of the senior editors were. I was doing all the geek stuff, trying to help people with their CDs, with their websites, as it was then. Then I did take on a team lead role as the department got restructured. And then I was doing team lead and doing digital stuff. And then my last job there was actually just doing the digital stuff. So we were doing iPad apps and ebook platforms and this kind of stuff, which was great. It gave me an opportunity to exercise my interests, which was great. And then the last stage in my career has been doing what I'm doing now, running Futureproof. So I left that education publisher because I was made redundant. In 2013, they made their digital team in education redundant. They didn't need any digital team there, which was fortunate for me because I had already been doing some planning for this business for about the previous 6 months, doing the research and stuff. So I was in a good place to push ahead and set up Futureproofs, which I've been doing for the last 5 years. My lessons from all of that, what I learned myself, education was important as a gate opener, as a door opener. I have no doubt that having a degree from Cambridge helped me get in my first job on a science journal. It took a long time to get there, and having the support of my wife who was working to get there was really important. But having something that stood out in the application list, I am quite sure didn't hurt me at all. I suspect, but cannot prove, that from that point on my degree was much less useful, because I think once you've been out of university a while, no one really cares. But yeah, I can't prove that. And that's one of the subtle things about privilege, is that it's much easier for people on the outside to see than often it is for you to see yourself. Then I was freelancing, and when you're touting for new business, you do talk about stuff that in your CV, and again, it hopefully makes you stand out a bit. And I was getting work from academic publishers, from the NHS, this kind of stuff, so it won't have hurt. I was also fortunate when I went to university, of course, that was in the era of student grants. So when I came out, I didn't immediately need to get a paying job to start paying off loans. I didn't have the mountain of debt that people often do these days, usually do these days, coming out of university, because my parents couldn't even then give me much money. This is why I got a grant. They were means tested. And when I left university and spent, as I say, 6 months unemployed looking for work, my wife had a job that would help us live. We therefore could afford a house to live in, which is kind of important. So I had the slack to spend a lot of time chasing something that was a dream, that was what I was shooting for. It doubtless doesn't hurt that I have a middle class background. My parents went to university. It was that was something I was used to. It wasn't a strange environment. And I'm a white middle class bloke. Straight, cis. I fit into the mould, which obviously makes it easy to be a part of groups. Like when I was at the education publisher for 8 years, I could move up through the ranks because in many ways I fitted into their picture of what somebody should look like who is into computers, who likes working on geeky things. And that background, working in educational publisher and working in academic publishers, helped enormously when it came time to set up the business now with Future Proofs. Knowing the market and the business and the problem and the people, having that network, helps a lot when you're trying to do something new and different and interesting, hopefully interesting. So the key things I take away from my story really is that I had an easier way in than many people do. I got to university and I went to a name university, which will have helped me get my first publishing jobs, which is a really hard gate to get through. Fitting into the mould of what people expect of an educated person doubtless doesn't hurt. I share this in the hopes that it will advance the conversation a little bit. You can never tell, but that's my piece of the story anyway. Next week on Talking Through My Hat, I'm interviewing Alison Jones of Practical Inspiration Publishing, talking about the importance of books as cultural artefacts, but even more as something that can drive a business, as something that the process of writing a book can drive a business, improve the way you do your work. So come back then to hear that conversation, and for now, goodbye. This was Talking Through My Hat, a podcast by John Pettigrew, founder of We Are Future Proofs. Please let me know your thoughts by leaving a review at Apple Podcasts or by commenting on the website, myhat.wearefutureproofs.com. You can subscribe to this channel at Apple Podcasts, Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Our theme music is from hooksounds.com.